I hate making wide receiver rankings because it reminds me of how bad my wide receiver room is in my league. Hopefully, you have somebody in the top 2 tiers that they are auto starts no matter what. Puka Nacua technically should be in his own tier at this point. He is S+ tier. I mean, Puka Nacua has just been incredible. It prints 20-point weeks. Jackson Smith-Njigba, also incredible. Justin Jefferson, I understand that he hasn't been great so far, but this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have him higher, lower, 77.5 total yards on Underdog Fantasy. Implied team total, 21.5 points. He'll be fine. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the projections are a little low on him. I don't understand why. The Cleveland Browns have had a phenomenal rush defense so far this year, but the Lions should be able to put points up with ease. So I'm assuming they're going to do a lot of that through the air. And St. Brown's had 4 receiving touchdowns over the past 2 weeks. Malik Neighbors will be very interesting to see what he looks like with Jackson Dart. A lot of times with these rookie quarterbacks, they don't really go through their progressions. They see their first read. If he's open, they're going to hit him. And I think Malik Neighbors is that first read. Looking at Nico Collins, I understand we haven't seen the 30-40 point performance from him yet, but it's in the cards, and the Texans are massive favorites over the Tennessee Titans in this game. And then with Jamar Chase, how the mighty have fallen. Obviously, he used to be in his own tier back whenever he was on my roster last season. But this year, you have one game with over 10 fantasy points. Week 1 against the Browns does absolutely nothing. This past week with no Burrow, he had 6 targets, 5 receptions, 50 receiving yards, lost a fumble so he doesn't crack 10 fantasy points. And this is a horrendous matchup against the Denver Broncos. I'm going to have to start T against on my own fantasy football team. So please, anybody in Cincinnati, if you are watching this, go trade for Jameis Winston. Do anything but put Jake Browning under center against this Broncos defense. Now, going over to our next tier, this is when maybe you start to have some real questions. Drake London's been horrendous for 3 weeks now. Drake London's the wide receiver 44 on the season. But with that being said, the dude still is averaging 8-9 targets a game. Sportsbooks are telling us that the Falcons offense will be a lot better this week against the Commanders defense, as opposed to where they were the worst offense in pretty much NFL history a week ago against the Panthers. Now, this is going to be my bold claim at this point. I'm going to just say, F it. Let's rank Jakobi Meyers as a top 10 wide receiver. Right now, the over-under in this Raiders-Bears game is like 50 points. This is supposed to be one of the highest scoring games of the entire week. We go through and we look at Jakobi Meyers. The man has had 26 targets through 3 weeks. This offense showed signs of life a week ago. Now, of course, it was all Trey Tucker. Am I expecting that to be the case this next week? Probably not. So I think Jakobi Meyers will start scoring touchdowns soon. Michael Mayer is going to be out this game as well, so it's another target that gets taken away. And if you have Jakobi Meyers, maybe this ranking is a little too high, but I'm ranking him here for the reason that you have to start him. If you have Courtland Sutton, you have to start him. Courtland Sutton going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. He hasn't had the volume yet, but Bo Nix has looked horrendous this year. Bo Nix has looked like one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. This is a get-right game. Right now, sportsbooks have the Denver Broncos as one of the best offenses in the league, mainly because they're going up against one of the worst defenses in the league with the Bengals. And Courtland Sutton at the same time has still been the wide receiver 17 in fantasy points with really disappointing offensive outputs for this Broncos team so far. Now, George Pickens will be our next name. Horrible matchup against the Packers. We've seen the Packers defense be able to come out here and they shut down Amon-Ra St. Brown week 1. But Pickens in back-to-back weeks now has had an identical stat line. It's hilarious. You look at the game log on flogfantasy.com and it looks like we have a glitch where it's 9 targets, 5 receptions, 68 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. 9 targets, 5 receptions, 68 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. Y'all know I'm not the big George Pickens guy. I frankly think that he's a little bit overrated. I think at the end of the day, he's a good real-life receiver because he stretches NFL defenses, but historically doesn't command a lot of volume. But we know 2 things. 1, the Dallas Cowboys have the worst defense in the NFL, so they're going to be playing from behind. And 2, there's nobody to throw the ball to outside of George Pickens and Jake Ferguson. So Pickens will get flooded with targets. Even if it's a tough matchup, you got to play him. Now, Egbuka is going to be a must-start wide receiver as well. If you are looking at Egbuka, he's going to be lower than this in our rest of season rankings Because if we are looking at rest of season, eventually Mike Evans is going to be fully healthy. Eventually Chris Godwin's going to be fully healthy. And eventually this Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver room should be one of the best in the league. But for now, Godwin, practice in full. We'll rank him later in this. He looks like he's going to play, but I'm not expecting Godwin to come in and play 90% of the snaps week one. Godwin's going to be a part-time player. Igbuka's going to absolutely crush. You have no Mike Evans. You have no Jalen McMillan. It's Igbuka, Sterling Shepard, and Chris Godwin this week. And they're going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, obviously, I'm rooting for the Bucs. I lived in Tampa for a year. My family's in Tampa. They're the only NFL team I've ever rooted on. But I'm probably going to lose this game. And you probably are going to see the Bucs have to throw the ball in the second half. And that's going to be funneled through one man and one man only. Now, Davante Adams will be our next receiver. The other game that's supposed to be super high scoring this week is this Colts-Rams contest. Applied team total of 26.5 points here for Los Angeles. Clearly, Puka Nacua is the alpha wide receiver target, but this is the most concentrated offense maybe in NFL history. Despite Puka Nacua being by far and away the best wide receiver in fantasy, you still have Davante Adams averaging almost 10 targets a game. So really like the game environment. Colts offense looks like they should be able to keep up with the Rams, and the Rams look like they'll have to throw the ball. Now, Tyreek Hill is in a spot where I'm going to rank him aggressively because sportsbooks are giving an implied team total of 23.5 points for Miami. I don't know if this is them telling us that the Jets are just bad. I don't know if this is them coming through and saying that we should be excited about the Dolphins offense after a 10-day rest break. But I don't know. Tyreek had 10 targets this past week. He had the receiving touchdown. Again, I was lower on Tyreek Hill in the rankings last week because the Dolphins projected to be a bottom 3 offense in the NFL against the Bills. But they're telling us that Tua is going to look competent here. And then going over and looking at Rome Odunze, Rome has been an absolute crusher. And this game should be very high scoring against the Raiders. Rome Odunze is the wide receiver 3 in total fantasy points this year. He has scored 4 touchdowns through 3 weeks. He's played 90% of the snaps for the Bears in every single game so far. We like the matchup. Loveland's injured. DJ Moore also at the same time looks like he may be on the way out. And honestly, right now, Rome Odunze may be my favorite pick on Underdog Fantasy this week, where you can take the higher than 59.5 receiving yards. And that's available in almost every single state. Now, if you're not already on Underdog Fantasy, I'll leave a link in the description. I'll leave a link in the comment section. If you use code FLOCK when you sign up, you're going to get $50 added to your account after you play your first 5. And on top of that, you're going to get a free Kyler Murray pick, more than less than half a total yard for the game on Thursday night. Now, moving over and looking at what we have with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown, very similar to what we said last week, is just going to be a must-start wide receiver every single week. You have actually a lower total here for the Philadelphia Eagles offense than I'd expect. But nonetheless, this past week, you saw the 10 targets. Week 2, honestly, had decent target volume with 8. I understand week 2, he didn't really do anything with them, but this is still an offense. It's going to score a lot of points. And if they have to throw the ball, it's going to be funneled through A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Now, going over and looking at Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers, I ranked crazy high last week, and I'm embarrassed about it. I mean, that game had a crazy high total. They were telling us, hey, Lamar's going to have to throw the ball a ton. Hey, he dropped back a bunch, got sacked a bunch, and Zay Flowers did absolutely nothing. Zay Flowers, though, so far this season is sitting with a total of 23 targets. And this matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, you do have the Baltimore Ravens projected as favorites, but it's not going to be a surprise at all if this does turn into a shootout and you have Lamar Jackson dropping back consistently. So Zay Flowers still somebody that we have to start. He looks like he's not a locked and loaded must start wide receiver 1 every single week. But in matchups in which the Ravens are going to have to throw, I'm fine getting him in. Now, Brian Thomas obviously has been horrendous. Brian Thomas is the wide receiver 54 this season. Parker Washington is absolutely dominating him. And everything comes down to the coach that cursed JSN 2 years ago, cursed Rome Odunze last season, and now he's bringing his voodoo magic over to Brian Thomas in Jacksonville. Brian Thomas has still had 25 targets through the first 3 weeks. He was still one of the best wide receivers in all of fantasy last year. So I'm going to give the young 22-year-old the benefit of the doubt that he is going to eventually get better. I'm still going to start him this week. But one more week with fewer than 10 fantasy points, I'll be ready to tell you to bench him. Now, going over and looking at Garrett Wilson, again, like I'm surprised at the over-under of this game against Miami. It's supposed to be high scoring, and with Wilson, he's had about 10 targets a game so far this year. He's yet to hit 100 receiving yards. The passing volume of this offense isn't going to be great, but the receiving touchdowns are there. Obviously, a lot of it's going to, honestly, it doesn't even matter who the quarterback is. It's not like he was any worse with Tyrod Taylor. If anything, he was better with Tyrod Taylor. I mean, Garrett Wilson with Tyrod Taylor dropped 24.5 points. Going through and looking at how many times he did that all of last year, it was 3. Looking at how many times he did that in 2023, he never did it. Looking at how many times he did it in 2022, he did it twice. So Tyrod Taylor just gave Garrett Wilson a top 5 performance of his NFL career. Now, Ted McMillan is going to be a must-start wide receiver for us. He's the wide receiver 30 in points per game so far this season, but I really like the matchup against the New England Patriots, while at the same time, you do have all the targets getting funneled through Ted. Plus, you have a multitude of injuries to other wide receivers here in this Carolina Panthers rotation. So if you're getting 10 targets a game, even if it's a bad offense, very similar to Garrett Wilson. The difference, I think, is Garrett Wilson has bigger play upside. Going over and looking at what we have with Ladd McConkey, Ladd has been horrendous. Ladd has been very clearly the wide receiver 3 in Los Angeles, and I really hope that continues to be the case, because if Quentin Johnston continues to cuck him, then I will be richer than Bill Gates himself. But for the time being, I'm still going to give the benefit of the doubt to Ladd McConkey, even if the target volume hasn't been there, because we saw him at the end of last season be a wide receiver 1 from weeks 11 onwards. And that's such a large sample for us to forget about just 3 weeks in for a young enough player that he's like 23. Going over and looking at Deebo Samuel, the Deebo Samuel rankings impossible. Obviously, I'm going to update these rankings on flogfantasy.com throughout the entire week. I'm having to put them here as a placeholder. Right now, sportsbooks are giving the Commanders a 23.5 point implied team total against the Falcons. We don't know the status on Daniels, and we don't know the status on Terry McLaurin at the time of this recording. So I'll update you, of course, in the live streams we're doing every single night and on the site. Just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Now, Ricky Pearsall will be our next name. If we are looking at Sticky Ricky, very similar to Deebo Samuel. This is a placeholder. He's going to go a lot higher than this in our rankings if you have no Jennings and Brock Purdy plays. He'll probably go lower than this in our rankings if Jennings plays and Purdy doesn't. So the matchup against Jacksonville is fine. The issue is, like, you assume that the Niners are able to just run the ball here in the second half. Now, let's go over and let's look at my guy, the player that I am rooting for more than anybody else, and that is Quentin Johnston. Hell, I included him in my engagement post. I like this guy so much. We're looking at him through the first 3 weeks, averaging about 18 points per game. He's the wide receiver 8 in fantasy. He has done this with volume as well. It hasn't just been random big plays. It hasn't just been random touchdowns. He's come through and he's averaged 8 targets a game. So I would love to eventually flip him and Ladd McConkey in these rankings. Right now, if you're looking at the projections on Underdog, Quentin Johnston's higher or lower 55.5 receiving yards. Ladd McConkey's higher or lower 62.5. We'll have Keenan Allen right here as well. Keenan Allen's also given you the target volume, where Keenan Allen's averaging actually about 9 targets a game. And Keenan Allen's actually at a receiving touchdown every single game as well. Now, if the touchdowns go away for Keenan, I think it's going to be a little bit devastating. He's been the wide receiver 6 so far this year. The reason I'm going to rank Quentin Johnston ahead of Keenan is I think you have big play upside with Quentin Johnston, where Keenan Allen is more so you're just hoping that he gets the touchdown. Now, going over and looking at Chris Olave, Olave definitely gives you like a higher median projection. Like Chris Olave on Underdog's higher or lower 61.5 receiving yards, whereas Keenan Allen's only higher or lower 49.5. But with Olave, there's no touchdown upside. The implied team total against the Bills is 16 points. The Bills have like a spread of like 17 points in this game. Like the Bills are going to possibly win this game by a larger margin than we've ever seen any team ever win a game before. Chris Olave is at the very top of the NFL in targets, where the man is averaging, yes, he is averaging almost 13 targets a game, but his yards per target mark is like Chase Brown's yards per carry mark. Full PPR format, he's getting there. He's the wide receiver 24 in points per game. There's just no upside with the dude. DK Metcalf, I hate to say this. I hate to admit this out loud, is my wide receiver 1 this week on my fantasy football team. I can't imagine how many of y'all have a wide receiver room as bad as I do. It is a blessing that I find myself 3-0. The dude is sitting here with double-digit points every single week, but we've gotten lucky to get to this point. He's had 52 receiving yards over the past 2 weeks. He's averaging less than 6 targets a game. If it wasn't for the receiving touchdowns over the past 2 weeks, he would be nothing. And this is a really tough matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I still think that DK Metcalf does have some big play upside. And to be fair, I mean, he's built like I am. So, of course, naturally, he's going to be scoring touchdowns at a much higher clip. I mean, Metcalf, Mason, both red zone monsters. But I hate the matchup against Minnesota. And going over and looking at Devonta Smith, if they have to throw the ball, he'll be a lot better than this. If they don't throw the ball, if they can just run it over and over again, he'll have no volume. Wide receiver 34 this year. I kind of understand who Devonta Smith is. I'd be a lot more excited about him if like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers weren't so banged up and we thought that this game had a better shot at being a shootout. I'm going over and looking at DJ Moore. DJ Moore's in what should be a high scoring contest, but the dude has had 5 targets, 6 targets, 5 targets. So far, he's had a total of 4 receptions per game this season. So he's the wide receiver 42. It looks like he may just end up getting traded. I do like the game environment. I'm looking at Marvin Harrison. I'm going to be ranking Marvin Harrison a lot higher than where the projections have him, because the projections on Underdog right now have Marvin Harrison at higher lower 45 and out receiving yards, and I have Cooper Kupp at like higher lower 42.5. The thing with Harrison is I'm fully willing to admit that the floor is lower than any other player on this list. The floor is he gets 2 receptions for 27 receiving yards. I can't even tell you how many games we've had that stat line from him. But he still does have the big play upside. He's still a very talented wide receiver, and they still really only have Trey McBride to throw the ball to. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I will say the Seattle Seahawks defense is great, though. Going over and looking at Jalen Waddle, completely fine play. This past week, you kind of get lucky here, 39 receiving yards, but he gets you the receiving touchdown. Back-to-back weeks with receiving touchdowns. And again, at least for my expectations, I think that sportsbooks are much higher on the Dolphins offense than what I was going to assume that they would be. Going over and looking at Juwan Jennings, I don't know if he's going to play. It'll be just something we have to monitor. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but obviously we'll see what happens on Thursday. We'll see what happens on Friday. When he did play last, he was the wide receiver 1 over Ricky Pearsall. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. will be our next wide receiver. I do think that Tyler Warren's the number 1 target in this offense, while at the same time, Jonathan Taylor's the number 1 weapon, and Daniel Jones going to have some rushing ability himself. So this should be a very high-scoring game. Michael Pittman Jr. has been the wide receiver 12, actually really helping our underdog teams, which is nice. But he has been running hot on touchdowns. The touchdown rate is for sure going to be coming down. Looking at T. Higgins, this is even more embarrassing than DK Metcalf being my wide receiver 1. T. Higgins is my wide receiver 2 this week. Oh, it's ugly. It is ugly. T. Higgins this past week had 2.5 fantasy points. He's the wide receiver 61 so far this season. And he has a tough matchup against the Denver Broncos. If I was being objective about this, you can maybe rank Jamison Williams ahead of him. At least with Jamison Williams, even if the volume's not going to be there, we can at least say he's in a good offense and he has big play upside. But like you go back and you look at how he was used against the Baltimore Ravens. Like what? He got involved on the first drive when every play is scripted, and then afterwards they never looked his way again. Going over looking at Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy got in a full practice on Wednesday. If he was like truly fully healthy and we had no concerns whatsoever with the injury, he would be way higher in my rankings this week. I mean, hell, against the Baltimore Ravens, Kansas City Chiefs have nobody to throw the ball to. Travis Kelce looks like he belongs in a retirement home. Rashee Rice still in jail / suspended. Obviously, that's a joke. He's not in jail. Xavier Worthy would be up like wide receiver 16 in my rankings, maybe even higher than that. But I just don't know if we can trust that the dude's healthy. I don't know how much he would actually play. So I'd rather avoid him if you have him. Like, he falls in a bucket of players that you don't play until he proves otherwise. Jerry Jeudy is a wide receiver on my bench right now. Judy's had consistent targets. Like, he's averaged 7 targets a game. And the Cleveland Browns are going to have to throw the ball to try to keep up here with the very good Detroit Lions offense. But Judy's looked straight up horrendous. Like, even in a great matchup against the Bengals week 1, I was like watching him and he was on my bench, but I was like, oh, hopefully he proves that he can be a solid bye week fill-in for us. And every single time he got targeted, the man just dropped the ball. Now, going over looking at Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson doesn't look good in this offense right now. If Justin Jefferson doesn't look good in this offense, how the hell am I going to tell you to put Jordan Addison there? Like, in a game environment which we have no idea what to expect, over-under of this game is pretty damn low as well. Going over and looking at Travis Hunter and kind of copy and paste the same thing we're saying with Jordan Addison. Brian Thomas isn't viable. How the hell is Travis Hunter going to be? Travis Hunter, so far this season, has had 16 targets. The man so far this season has had 10 receptions, and he has yet to have more than 33 receiving yards. So, like, I'm putting Travis Hunter here as saying, like, send up a prayer that he scores a touchdown. Honestly, Trey Tucker, while I do give him crap, and while I was saying on the waiver wire video that he's going to be very low in my rankings this week, what is hilarious is Trey Tucker, obviously, week 2 does nothing, right? Week 2, the dude has 3 receptions. Based off him dropping 41 points in week 3, he's the wide receiver 4 this season. Unbelievable. Like, if you drafted him in best ball, you're a genius. If you started him in week 3, you are next level. The matchup should be good where the Raiders are supposed to score a bunch of points. I honestly may need to move Trey Tucker ahead of Travis Hunter, Jordan Addison, Jerry Jeudy. Like, there's no reason. I'm going to move him ahead of Travis Hunter on the site. There's no reason for me to have Travis Hunter over Trey Tucker at this point. Terry McLaurin, this is a placeholder ranking. I don't know if Daniel's going to play. I don't know if Scary Terry's going to play. I just literally have no idea. Darnell Mooney will be our next guy. With Darnell Mooney, he had a considerable amount of target volume this past week. Now, of course, the offense was worse than any offense I've ever seen in my entire life, but he had 11 targets in it, and sportsbooks this week are telling us the offense should be decent. The team has an implied team total of 22 points. Mooney's higher, lower, 44.5 total yards on Underdog Fantasy. Looking at Matthew Golden, I really like the potential for a boom week this week. In general, very similar to Xavier Worthy, Matthew Golden falls into the bucket of players that I cannot put in my starting lineup until they prove otherwise. He has 6 receptions so far this season. He has scored 3.6, 1.5, and 10.1 fantasy points. I love the matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, but with pretty much, I don't want to start any of these guys. Anybody from 33 onwards, put them on your bench. Like, Calvin Ridley's looked like the worst wide receiver in the NFL, and he projects to be in the worst offense in the league this week. Josh Downs, I'm looking at the majority of your teams every single night in the live stream. He seems to be on the waiver wire. Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, the Buffalo Bills have clearly told us we want to run the ball over and over and over again, and the New Orleans Saints aren't going to be able to stop them. Cooper Kupp, I don't really see what the upside is. Stephon Diggs can't get on the field, and Chris Godwin falls in the bucket of like, hey, I really hope he does well for my best ball teams, but I'm not starting him in a regular league until he actually proves it. So don't start anybody in the bottom tier. Don't start anybody in the tier above. The only guys you can start are wide receivers 32 and above. And if you have anybody 33 and below, please put a running back in your flex instead. But I really appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out. And of course, if you saw any of those pick'ems, you're like, oh, that's way wrong. If you wanted to go through and you wanted to take the higher than 59.5 receiving yards on Rome Odunze, it's on Underdog Fantasy. Links in the description, links in the comment section. Underdog Fantasy is available in almost every single state. Plus, if you use code FLOCK when you sign up, you're going to get $50 added to your account after you play your first 5, and you'll get a free Kyler Murray pick more than less than half total yard. But that's all I got. Really appreciate you, and really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later today.